I just finished making a video and I had one additional thought, so you'll see it doesn't really match with the rest of this video, but I wanted to start out to explain before I go into this, is that a lot of our behaviors and thoughts that are impacting us with depression and things like that, we can choose to allow those thoughts to bug us. And one thing that motivates us to make that choice is determine what are your priorities in life. What is your motivation? What is your purpose? Why are you here on this earth? What do you want to achieve? And when you think about those initial thoughts that enter your mind that are causing stress, you ask yourself, does it even matter what I am worrying about? And how does that impact my ability to achieve success and my end state and goal and desire for this life? Just want to say that, now we'll go into the rest of the video. See things differently and to not focus on the immediate thoughts that were entering my mind and allowing all the various stimuli enter my mind control how I wanted to feel. Right now my emotional state could be a lot worse, but it's not, because I chose for myself to control my initial thoughts and worries that enter my head. And so I'm dealing with some severe neurological issues for a long time. I'm dealing with sleep apnea, lack of oxygen to the brain. The sympathetic nervous system constantly kicking on at night causes all kinds of neurological issues. And I began to worry about this a lot, and I was focused on it too much. And I chose for myself to change my view and perspective and chose not to worry. There's lots of trials and things that are happening in life, and we can't stop those, but we can choose how we're going to react to them. And when you choose not to focus on the negative of them, your perception and your perspective totally changes in a couple months, because instead of focusing on the negative, I have focused on what is happening in my brain and how can I fix this, and then how can I help others. I'm going to talk about today. So today we're going to talk about primary body dysmorphic disorder and then some of the other phobias. So within the DSM-5, which is the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, it's a manual that is used by psychologists to diagnose if somebody has a certain disorder. This version, it groups body dysmorphic disorder kind of in compulsive disorders. You're kind of obsessing over a specific thing. Trichotillomania, that is where people are constantly focusing on pulling their hair out. There's exoriation, that is where someone is always picking at their skin and things like that. There's hoarding. Disorders are grouped within there, but within body dysmorphic disorder, if doing those things to kind of change your appearance, because body dysmorphic disorder is really defining as someone who has a perception that there's a flaw within their body, that their body isn't perfect and it isn't the way it should be. And when they diagnose this disorder, what they're looking at is this impacting your life. When it says impacting your life, is the basic needs and things you need to do to survive. Like, is it making it to where you don't show up to work, or you can't function with your family and things like that. It's a perceived flaw is what you are looking at. So it could be, you need to look at this closely. If there actually is a flaw, like let's say you're missing an arm, or you've lost lots of weight and you have extra skin. And so I want to talk about now what happens in the brain when someone goes into anxiety or when they're worried. And then when I talk about what happens in the brain, that's not quite such perceived because it's actually there, but it still could kind of go into the body dysmorphic disorder, because you may have a perception of what others are thinking about you, and that all creates a level of anxiety. Now I'm going to talk about what happens inside the brain. Somebody is worried and thoughts enter their head, whether it's body dysmorphic disorder or anything, any type of social situation, social anxiety, or whatever it is that causes them to do some type of compulsive behavior that is not good for them. And so this video can apply to any type of anxieties and compulsiveness to help you. So let's talk about what happens in the mind when somebody is worrying and focusing on something. Let's talk about what happens in the mind when somebody's worrying and focusing on something. And it raises a level of anxiety because they perceive something isn't right, or something is causing a phobia. Let's talk about that.
I'm so worried about the way I look.
Okay, so now let's see what happens in the brain when somebody has anxiety or negative thoughts, or they're worrying about something. let's turn your head this way so we can look inside. No, just look right here. We look inside the brain right here. So here's her brain. So what we have immediately, through her eyes, she perceives something and stimuli and begins to make sense of whatever is happening. And so the thoughts go in her mind, and thoughts make a decision and decide how to make sense of this. And the variables that help her make sense of this are multiple stimuli, billions of stimuli that have entered her brain since birth that kind of defines what normalcy is. And so she sees this, and all of a sudden, when she makes sense of it, it quickly enters her mind, and she's like, this is not right. So like, if you have issues with your body, your brain is telling you, hey, the way your body is looking, that is not how it should look. And so your mind is tricking you to see a alternate perception of reality. And so then what happens, so since it doesn't align with what you perceive as reality, and also like this response happens when, if you see something on Facebook that goes against your bias, this happens as well. So now, once the stimuli enter the mind through either the senses, it immediately goes to the amygdala so they can retrieve long-term memories to now make a perception of what they were seeing, to make sense of what they were seeing. And that also at the same time will send signals up to the thalamus. And the thalamus is going to bypass and then go into the prefrontal cortex to try and make sense of what's happening and go back to the amygdala. And then the amygdala is also going to send information to various glands within the body. That will begin the release of catecholamines, which are neurotransmitters and multiple hormones, telling the body to release hormones in specific areas of where it thinks it needs to prepare for a fight. This is part of the fight for flight response. Now, the whole act of this worrying and the focusing on this and choosing to focus is now sending hormones to different parts of your body, and it's unnecessary for these hormones to go there. They're being pushed here when it could have been stopped. You could have chose to prevent these thoughts and stop this from happening. And that is what causes the level of stress. What you can do is prevent this, and there's a way to prevent it when you understand what's happening in the mind. What happens when this got triggered, you have the sympathetic nervous system on one side and the parasympathetic nervous system on the other side. So when that fight for flight response kicked in, when you began to worry and the amygdala is firing up, the sympathetic nervous system kicked on, and that's sending all kinds of stress to your body, making you really stressed. But if you turn on the parasympathetic nervous system, that can cause you to relax. And so when those things kick in, there's things you can do such as mindfulness. And I have a video on mindfulness. I'll put the link right here. You can watch it. Or cognitive behavioral therapy. And I got more information on cognitive behavioral therapy in one of my videos as well. And so what happens is when you relax, you're turning on the parasympathetic nervous system, which is then going to cause your body to go calm down. What's happening in the brain, that helps us figure out now how can we combat it. And so I'm going to talk about ways to combat it when it happens and what you can do to prevent it from being as strong when it happens. So first let's talk about what you can do right when it happens. So I talked about the mindfulness. Mindfulness, that's where you're completely taking all your focus in it. It's not relaxation. It's taking all of your focus and energy and focusing on one variable. Putting your brain completely on that one variable. Because they have done studies that show do that mindfulness exercise over a long period of time, that amygdala in there loses its strength and ability. The prefrontal cortex up here, which deals a lot with the making sense and preventing you from perceiving false stuff, it gets stronger. And so that's what mindfulness can do. And then also breathing exercises will help trigger and turn on that parasympathetic nervous system. So preventive measures. Also, cognitive behavioral therapy. So cognitive behavioral therapy is when you challenge those initial thoughts. And that was what has really helped me with what I'm dealing with now. My perception has changed. I chose not to worry on the variables. Instead, I chose to find ways to grow in the face of what I'm dealing with. 2 techniques to deal with this. And this technique is mindfulness. Mindfulness is not so much relaxation or meditation. It's taking all of your efforts, physical, emotional, spiritual, and focusing on one single variable and not allowing any other thoughts to enter your mind. And cognitive behavioral therapy, and that's where you start to challenge your thoughts, make sense of your thoughts, and figure out what is causing those thoughts. It's where you sit back and you see yourself seeing, you perceive yourself perceiving, you sit back and figure out what is making me think that way, and then you make sense. Should I really be worrying about that? And let me give you an example. Body dysmorphic, because you know body dysmorphic, you're really focusing on a perceived thing that's wrong. You actually do physically have something that's wrong that you can see, but you're focusing on that, and that's causing stress. So let's think about those initial thoughts. You see that body part, that flaw, and you start to get really depressed. And so immediately what you can do is, let's go into some mindfulness. Let's focus on something. Wherever you are right now, you can apply mindfulness. Remember, it's put your pure focus on something. I'm in here right now. I'm going to count all the lines on that vent and only focus my mind on how many lines are on that vent. Or I'm going to just stare at this flower and count the petals and understand the color. So it's you put your pure mind on that. Do that for a few minutes. Then you start to think, what is it that's bugging me? And then think about, why is it really bugging you? And how does it impact your ability to obtain your purpose in life, your motivation, your reason? And is that flaw that is bugging you going to prevent you from achieving success? Is it hindering your ability to choose a success? And then think about, the most important thing is, if you can't get rid of that flaw and it's going to be there, how can I grow from it? How can I push it aside or grow from it? Maybe that growth is you learn to overcome it and become strong, and you share this with other people. But as that thought enters your mind, question it and think, is it really important for me to worry about this? Is it really impacting my life? I mean, it may be annoying, but should I let it? Should I choose to allow it to bug me? Because if it stays there for the rest of its life, how is it going to impact my achieving of my goal and purpose? Where are your priorities? Are your priorities going out and caring about what other people think? You should not care about what other people think. You will mentally crash if you care about what other people think. That is why social media is so bad, because we allow it to influence us. And so those thoughts enter your mind, you think about it, and I choose to not let this bug me. I'm going to focus on what matters in life, what my purpose is, and focus on that. Choose, and your total perception will change. And so some of the key things I think can help as well if you're dealing with body dysmorphic or worried about what other people think. Stay off social media. Stay away from the things that help trigger your response. And you may not know what it is that triggers your response. That's why it's good to take a journal and figure out, what did I just do that caused me to really get the anxiety? And when you identify these situations, prep and have your action plan ready. So when you do feel that way, you're like, okay, I'm going to do some mindfulness, and then I'm going to go through my steps of questioning these initial thoughts. Because it's amazing. Once you learn to control your thoughts and perceive the world differently, things are so different. We don't see reality until we realize how to control and our thoughts and really see ourselves seeing and things like that. And so, like, if social media is causing issues, social media is so bad. I mean, it forces people to compare themselves to others. Don't compare yourself to others. And then the bad thing about social media is that it is creating a society of unthinkers. There's I think it's social eccentric was a term that some sociologists created, to where we do what society says. We are controlled by society. We'll do what they say. Society says we should look this way. We will let that control our perceptions and thoughts. And you can allow this to change. And I don't know if I maybe rambled too much on this video, coming up with ideas and whatever, but I think the biggest takeaway is understanding what's happening in the brain, and that you can stop it, and you can control and change how you perceive reality. It's in your hands.